I wrestled a bit this morning with the idea and the direction that we should move. You need to understand a couple things before we begin. I'm not an evangelist, and I'm not particularly in the role of evangelist, and that's not what I'm asked to do here. Also, I've been around here long enough to not really be just kind of an occasional entrant. I know you guys a little bit, and you know me, so kind of it's there. And I am not your pastor, although my default position has always been that of a pastor. That's who I am. That's my nature. And as I was speaking with my grandson this week, we were talking about gifts, and he said, exactly, what do you mean by that? Trying to explain to a 10-year-old about gifts is a tough thing. Well, I understand my giftedness. My giftedness is in the area of pastoring. So today, I want to talk with you as a pastor. Now, if you want to be real biblical about that, Paul would say, I speak this by permission. That's kind of a King James way of putting it. But I want to speak to you today as a pastor, and I'm going to pretend for a few moments that you've known me for a long time and that we've been on that pastor parishioner journey for quite a while. So I think we'll probably come pretty close to where we're at. At 211 degrees, water is really, really hot. It's very hot. However, it's not until water reaches 212 degrees that it boils. And only boiling water creates steam. And steam can power the largest engines on the face of the earth. 1 degree can make all the difference in the world in whether or not you have power. What if you, the community of First Congregation, remember that pastor thing, by permission? What if you, the community of First Congregation, recognized the need, and you were driven enough to ratchet up your efforts for Christ by 1 degree? You see, if that happened, it would manifest itself in your relationships, which as far as I know are wonderful already, but your relationships would show that being ratcheted up. It would certainly ratchet up, and you do a great job here, but even more in community impact. And most importantly, you would find it in your passion to introduce individuals to the transformational power of Jesus Christ and His teaching, and then nurture them in the way of Christ so that they can walk with Him. But what would that kind of power look like? Where would that kind of power take you? Now, if I were doing a series on something like this, let me tell you some areas that we probably would have already covered, and I might be wrapping it up with this little study today. I probably would have spent a week and we would have talked about the whole idea of becoming intentionally innovative in what it is that we do in ministry. I could talk about that a long time. I'm not going to, but it would have been fun talking about what it is to be intentionally innovative in ministry. We could have spent some time, some significant time, on building healthy families. And it doesn't matter who you are and what family you come from today. That is indeed an incredible challenge, because you're not going to get any help from anywhere other than the church in building healthy families. We could have talked about what it would be, and probably would have talked about the whole idea of becoming a church. What does a church look like in 2014? What's a church supposed to look like in 2014? What's it going to look like a few years down the road? I mean, think of 2020 what should a church look like? And then if I ended on today, I'd be talking about this whole idea that the church is in the business of helping people understand what restoration is all about life restoration. What if the church were more like a hospital than a club? Could we deal with the messes? What would happen if we became whole again because of collective efforts? What would happen? One of the biggest issues with any organization, be it church or otherwise, is this whole idea of comfortableness. It's our default position. We all like it. Comfortableness of most religious organizations when it occurs isn't always that pretty. It was early on in my ministry, and I had a gentleman take me under his wing, and he's since gone to be with the Lord, and had a wonderful and distinguished ministry. But one day he took me into a bookstore. His name was Dr. William Draper. He took me into a bookstore as just a young kid, pastor. I think I was still in graduate school at the time. He took me into a bookstore. He said, "Turn here, kid. I want to buy you a book." I said, "Okay." By the way, I still have a book. "I want to buy you a book." "Okay, what are you going to buy me?" He said, "Just buy it." And he goes over and he picks out what looks like a textbook. Why do I want another textbook? It's a preaching ideas, textbook. He said, "Take this." It's Kleinbell's book on counseling. If you haven't read it, you ought to read it. I guess it's probably still around. I don't know if it's still in print. He said, "Read this book." And he said, "Do it quick." Well, I took his word. I took his advice. I turned to the first chapter, a good place to start, and I started the first chapter, and here was the illustration that I found, and then I understood why he gave me the book. And it's a little bit of a lengthy read, but let me read you a couple pages of it. It says, "On a dangerous seacoast where shipwrecks often occur, there was once a crude little life-saving station. The building was just a hut, and there was only one boat, but a few devoted members kept constant watch over the city, with no thought for themselves, and they went out day and night, tirelessly, searching for the lost. Many lives were saved by this wonderful little life station. So that it became famous. Some of those who were saved and various others in the surrounding area wanted to become associated with this station, and they gave it their time, and they gave it their money, and they gave it their effort for the support of the work. New boats were bought, new crews were trained. The little life-saving station grew. Some of the new members of the life-saving station were unhappy that the building was so crude, so poorly equipped. They felt that a more comfortable place should be provided as the first refuge for those who were being saved from the sea. So they replaced the emergency cots with beds. They put better furniture in an enlarged building. Now the life-saving station became a popular gathering place for its members. They redecorated it beautifully and furnished it as a sort of club. Less of the members were now interested in going out to sea on life-saving missions, so they hired boat crews to do this work. The mission of life-saving was still given lip service, but most were too busy or lacked the necessary commitment to take part in life-saving activities personally. About this time, a large ship wrecked off the coast, and the hired crews brought in boatloads of wet and half-drowned people. They were dirty, they were sick, and some of them had black skin, some had strange language, and the new beautiful club was considerably messed up. So the property committee immediately had a shower built outside the club where victims of shipwreck could be cleaned up before they come inside. At the next meeting, there was a split in the club. Membership decided to go different directions. Most of the members wanted to stop the club's life-saving activities as being unpleasant and a hindrance to the normal life pattern of the club. But some members insisted that life-saving was still their primary purpose and pointed out that they were still called to be a life-saving station. They were finally voted down and told that if they wanted to save the life of all those various kinds of people who were shipwrecked in those waters, they could begin their own life-saving station down the coast, and they did. As the years went by, the new station experienced the same changes that occurred in the old. They evolved into a club, and yet another life-saving station was found. If you visit the seacoast today, you'll find a number of exclusive clubs along that shore. Shipwrecks are still frequent in those waters, but most of the people drown these days. It was a long way from the textbook. If you need 4 things to hang on to today, let me give you one to begin with. One of the ingredients of making the church more like a hospital than a club is that we become more interested in need identification and need comparison. Have you ever consciously gone out and sought someone in need with a specific goal of taking care of that person? I know you have, many of you have. You're known for it. But let me just ask you the question, have you done it recently? I've not done it nearly enough in my life, but the few times that I have been times of incredible joy. We were pastoring a little town not far from here years ago, and someone called me one day, it was near the Christmas season, and said, I have some teddy bears. It's not normally something to give to the pastor. Some teddy bears. Okay, sure. Me and somebody met me. When I showed up, and there were teddy bears, and they were white. They were probably about that big. They were beautiful. They were all dressed out. They were just absolutely beautiful. And the next question was, how many would you like? I can get you 100 if you want. I don't know what to do with 100 teddy bears. You know, when kids were small, they'd like one, but I don't know what to do. Well, we took the teddy bears. And for that Christmas, we were on this mission to give away as many teddy bears as we could give away. It was quite a kick, believe me, to give teddy bears to kids who had absolutely nothing. And they were good-looking teddy bears. Another pastor, I followed a guy who had some, and I don't know what this disorder is, or phobia, or whatever you want to call it, but he had some penchant for collecting stuff. He wouldn't buy one thing, he would buy a bunch of things. And by that I mean things like socks. You know, he would have maybe 15 boxes of socks in various sizes. He was very organized, had things very put together. Anyway, when I moved to town, that stuff all took off, took it with him to his next assignment, but that was his thing. He bought things in bulk. Maybe when there was a truck accident or something, he always seemed to know where to get a deal. And he took all of that stuff. We didn't have hardly any of it left. Except. And you'll remember the rage, and you go back in your day. Except for some reason, he left us the kerosene heaters. Do you remember those little things that you supposedly safe and high efficient? You light them and burn in your home. You know, they were quite the rage. I would guess that probably I had 40 brand new kerosene heaters. Boxes, everything else. Big things. Quite a kick finding families who need heat and a way to secure their home, hoping they don't burn it down, and giving them heat. Pastor in Oklahoma. One of the gentlemen in our congregation was very successful and went on to become one of the top couple people in Phillips Petroleum. And David called me one day. He was just about my age, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, Pastor," he said, "God's been really good." And he said, "You know, the oil business was booming at that time as it is today. God's been really good." And he said, "Very honestly, Carolyn and I have more money than we know what to do with." And he said, here's a significant amount of money, and he gave it to me. And he said, "I want you to draw it out in certain increments." And he said, "Here's the deal." By the way, this is a pastor's delight. He said, "Here's the deal. Do not run this through the church." He said, "I need absolutely no tax credit," and he was assistant to the treasurer at that time. He knew what he was doing. He said, "I need no tax credit. I need nothing else." He said, "Do not run this through the church." But he said, "What I want you to do is I want you to have a close accounting of it, and then I want you to take this money and distribute it to people with need." And he said, "That's it. Period. Go use it." Well, that's only happened, by the way, one time. Pastor probably won't happen again. And I can go on and on. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful moments. But let me tell you one of the best ones. Pastoring in that same community in Oklahoma, I was on my way down the interstate one day, dodging armadillos and everything else, you know, just going down this nice divided highway. And kind of lower than the snakes back that day, as sometimes happens to pastors. And I needed something to boost me up and get me going. And I'm on my way down, at that point, on my way to Tulsa. Driving down the road out in the middle of nowhere, believe me, nowhere. Here's a lady and her daughter standing outside the car. Something's wrong, and they're waving. You know, I don't stop for people like that very often. But I thought, you know, what else can happen? I feel pretty lousy. These people need help. I'm going to stop and help. But it wasn't too complicated. They run out of gas. Closest gas station is about 20 miles away. It was really, really, really hot Oklahoma summer's day. I said, "Why don't you hop in the car with me?" And we drove to the filling station and got gas and brought it back to them, put it in the car, and they're on their way. That was more about me than it was about them, believe me. Because after they went down the road, I continued my journey, and with careful eye, the rest of the way, I looked and I thought, I hope I see someone else in need. Because that's absolutely one of the best things that's happened to me for a long time. Now those are all benevolent funds and benevolent needs, and they're all perfectly legitimate. But shift gears with me for just a second. That's all stuff. The greater gift of the church is salvation, is grace, is wholeness, and is healing. And we have it at our fingertips, and we're called to be dispensers of it. The world desperately needs the message that we have, and it's up to us to communicate the good news of Jesus Christ. Remember that first little point. One of the ingredients of making the church more like the hospital and the clubs is that we need to become more interested in need identification and comparison, or need identification and comparison. Second one, I butchered that one. Let me give you a second one. The church has the need to take on hospital-like traits because we live in a broken, sick, sinful, fallen world. When our first parents, Adam and Eve, committed their first disobedience against God in the Garden of Eden, they likely had no idea the depth of their disobedience. Theologians put a big phrase with this. They tell us that they were the progenitors of the race, or they were the originators of the line of descent of mankind. And consequently, that decision, or how do you want that decision, or those decisions of Adam and Eve, those first parents, when they set up their decision, or they followed through their decision to disobey God, they set it into motion, a chain of events that even God himself, by his own limitations, could not reverse, because he personifies ultimate integrity, and the results of that bad Eden decision are on us and around us everywhere. Children rebel, sickness and death strikes everywhere, marriages fall apart, temptations overwhelm us, relationships experience stress, financial crushes, emotional stress. The list goes on, and it all goes back to those bad decisions made in the garden by Adam and Eve. And it's into that broken world that the church is given the challenge to carry the message of hope. Carry each other's burdens, the Scripture says, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Just remember, the church has the need to take on a hospital-like traits as we live in a broken, sick, and sinful world. Number 3, hospitals are intended to be, and normally are, safe places. Care always has some inherent risk for caregivers. Listen to the news this past week, and it's filled with those who dare to give care and are themselves stricken by the Ebola virus. It's amazing. If you've been around the hospital much at all, or if you've worked there, or you have family or friends there, most of you you soon realize that those who extend care do so at great personal risk. I have some trigger words after spending a few years around the hospital. Let me tell you some trigger words I have at the hospital. Don't make me go faster than you can imagine. Gun. I've heard that word a few times around hospitals. When I hear the word gun, I don't go at it, I go from it. I'm not much of a hero. Knife, that'll get me there. And there's another one that'll make me go even faster than either of those. It's vomit. I'm gone. I used to tell him that I'm a chain vomiter, so the best thing for me to do is get out of it. And no matter what the mess may be, there still remains the challenge to provide quality care. Those who are committed to providing quality care do so at great personal risk, and they fight through all of the junk so that they can extend care. Believe me, some of the bravest people I've ever met in my life are healthcare professionals who do so without all the benefits of protection right at that moment. They do so because it's their passion, it's their mission, it's their calling. And the other thing is, I think they get a little bit of an adrenaline rush at the right time. And when it kicks in, get out of the way. Believe me, get out of the way. Because they're on mission, and they're going to take care of whatever it is they need to take care of, because that adrenaline rush pushes them. They understand that the hospital is intended to be a safe place to be for those who come into the hospital. But the church must also be a safe place to be. Boy, would I like to spend a lot of time here, but let me just put it real simple. The world hasn't yet seen what the church can do if it gets on a real spiritual adrenaline high. Not yet. Well, number 4, I told you today I slipped into the pastor role. I appreciate your time, your tolerance in letting me do that. But hopefully it's a message that challenges you as you take off in some new directions with your interim pastor. And I want you to do that, and I want you to do that, and do that very faithfully and follow them with real honesty and integrity. Let me give you the 4th one. We need the keen awareness of, but for the grace of God, there's a great risk in talking about this. And let me see if I can do this carefully. When I become too invested, I do so at the risk of losing my objectivity. But if I fail to be sensitive enough, I stand to lose a whole lot more. Would you stand with me as we bow our heads in prayer? Oh God, our need is to feel the intense heat that comes from your presence. We need to feel how profound it is when it warms our souls. We are attempting to do the correct kingdom building, kingdom advancing stuff. But we always need that extra degree of you. So this day, warm our hearts, warm our souls. Remind us that we could indeed ratchet it up, whether it's a degree or 2 or 3. Help us as a church to stay on mission in the name of Christ our Lord.